of it then. Giving me a hard time streaming to LinkedIn, and I have no idea why. Let me try this again.
Technology is either our best friend or our worst enemy.
Yeah, it's like so helpful. But...
And also, while I'm speaking of technology, let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, on that. And then also close out your other windows as well. Because when we have lots of windows open on our computer, the streaming doesn't buffer nearly as well.
Okay. Everything's closed.
What a pain in the butt. Okay. We are live. We are live. We were just saying technology is, it is what it is, right, Shannon? I mean, it can be your best friend. It could be, so we are here today and we are talking the child standard of disability for Social Security disability benefits. And this is on behalf of Stanley Law Offices, of course, and I am with our Social Security disability crack attorney, and that is Shannon Doan, who's Shannon, you're a little bit under the weather today, darling.
Yes, the spring allergy season has caught up with me, and so if I cough, sneeze, or otherwise don't sound like my normal self, I apologize in advance.
All right. Well, and I've promised Shannon that I'll take over if necessary, but she's a trooper, so we're in good hands. I know that we're in good hands. So we have done several of these previously, and I would encourage anyone out there, whether you're watching this live or on replay, to go and take a look at the adult standard of disability, the differences between SSI, right, Shannon? SSI and SSD.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some really helpful FAQ videos on our website at stanleylawoffices.com. You can also email with any questions that you may have to info@stanleylawoffices.com. Or certainly, as always, of course, call the office at 1-800-608-3333. I want to point out that Shannon's services on behalf of Stanley Law are available in all 50 states. So while Stanley Law is predominantly based in upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania, we can do Social Security disability coast to coast. And all hearings are virtual anyway. So it's very easy if you take a look at some of our online reviews and the SSD reviews in particular to see what the process is like and how Shannon and her team facilitate so well and communicate and dot all the I's and cross all the T's to ensure that clients know where their case is at every step of the way. So with that, I am going to get started here. I'm going to add Shannon's slides to the viewfinder. And Shannon, if you want to, let's go back to the beginning. If you want to walk us through this, and then I encourage anyone who has a question, please post it. I'm monitoring on Facebook, etc. And Shannon, take it away.
What we're going to talk about today is how Social Security defines disability for children. Obviously, what children can and cannot do can be very different from adults. So there is a need to have a separate definition of disability for children and a separate process for evaluating child claims. Social Security defines disability as a child having a medically determinable physical or mental condition that, number one, results in marked and severe functional limitations, and number two, has lasted for 12 continuous months, can be expected to last for 12 continuous months, or could be expected to result in death. There is an additional requirement that the child cannot be engaging in substantial gainful work activity. But I honestly have to say I've never seen that issue come up in a child's case in all of my years, but there is that other consideration. So essentially the child cannot be working at a gainful level. Let's go back and look at the step-by-step process that Social Security will use to decide whether that child is disabled.
Oh, so is this the next slide, Shannon?
Yes,
Sorry.
I apologize.
Yes, sorry. Okay.
The step-by-step process for a child disability case, number one, looks at that substantial gainful activity. Is the child working? The second step evaluates whether the child has what is defined by Social Security as a severe impairment. Social Security defines a severe impairment for a child as something that creates more than a slight abnormality or a combination of slight abnormalities that cause more than minimal functional limitations. The next step is that Social Security will consider whether the child has an impairment or a combination of impairments that, number one, medically meets a listing. And we talked previously in the adult standard video, meeting a listing is essentially a child's condition has all of the requirements set out in a specific provision of Social Security policy. The second way that Social Security can find a child disabled is if they find that the child equals a listing. And what that means is, although the child may not have each and every specific requirement, a medical expert finds that the totality of the record, in essence, establishes that they meet the listing requirements. And then the last way that Social Security can find a child disabled is if they find that the child functionally equals a listing. So let's talk a little bit now about what functional equivalence is. So this would be the next slide. And for functional equivalence, Social Security must find that the impairment must be at listing level severity. What that means is Social Security is going to require that the impairment or combination result in marked limitations in 2 domains of the 6 domains of functioning that are considered for children, or an extreme limitation in 1 domain of functioning. Child's cases can be a little tricky because there are so many different terms and concepts to understand. There are a lot of moving parts. So let's talk a little bit now about what those marked and extreme terms mean. A marked limitation is generally present when an impairment or combination of them interferes seriously with the child's ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. Extreme limitation is a higher level of limitation and is generally present when an impairment or combination of impairments interferes very seriously with the child's ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. So now that we've talked about what marked and extreme mean, let's kind of go over what those domains of functioning are. There are 6 functional domains that Social Security is going to evaluate in every child's case. The first domain is a child's ability to acquire and use information. Number 2 is the child's ability to attend and complete tasks. Number 3, interacting and relating with others. Excuse me. Number 4, moving about and manipulating objects. Number 5 is the child's ability to care for himself or herself. And the last domain is a child's health and physical well-being. It should be noted that in a child's case, any given impairment may possibly have effects in more than one of these domains. It's not just one impairment causing issues in one domain. We look
Right.
at the whole child approach and realize that different conditions can cross some, if not all, of these domains at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about what the basic considerations are in determining disability for children, and talk about the types of information that Social Security looks at and can be important in a child's case. Number one, obviously, would be medical evidence. So we're talking about symptoms, signs, and laboratory findings that are in the child's medical records. What is being reported to the doctors in terms of the child's symptoms, what the doctors are observing in terms of their clinical exams, and laboratory findings or other diagnostic testing, because it's important for Social Security to see that the subjective reports being made are consistent with what the objective findings are. Other evidence can be test scores. If your child is receiving special education services in school, IQ testing and other types of testing that would be performed within those evaluations can be critical in a child's case. And again, talking about the findings and observations of medical sources. Other non-medical evidence, if you will, can be statements from parents or caregivers. Those folks are with children several hours a day, often much more than a doctor is seeing them or school personnel. So the things that they're observing about the child's conditions and behaviors and functioning can be very, very critical in a child's case. Other people who can offer valuable information are reports from any early intervention programs or preschool programs, information from a child's teachers and school personnel. All of these pieces combined help illustrate how well or not well a child is doing in all of those very important domains of functioning. Other factors to consider when evaluating the effects of a child's impairment on his or her ability to function. We want to make sure that the limitations in functioning actually do result from a medically determinable impairment. That's critical. There has to be a nexus between what the child's medically determinable impairment is and the limitations in functioning. Other factors to consider are the child's symptoms, which could be things like pain, fatigue, decreased energy, anxiety. A common impairment in child's cases is ADHD, and how those symptoms, the inability to concentrate or focus or sit still, are considered in evaluating how significant the functional limitations are. Another factor to consider is how a particular child's functioning compares to children of the same age who do not have impairments. It's going to stand in stark contrast if a child with an impairment is still functioning at the same or similar level to children of the same age, as compared to a child whose functioning is delayed, sometimes profoundly, compared to children of the same age without impairments. Another factor to consider is the combined effect of multiple impairments. And we've, I think, talked about this previously as well when we talked about the adult standard. Sometimes physical conditions can manifest in terms of limitations in physical and mental functioning. Sometimes mental impairments can also result in limitations in both physical and mental. So we want to look at how everything works together or works against each other in some cases in terms of multiple impairments. Another thing that's important to consider with children is how a child functions in unfamiliar or unusual settings. I can speak from experience as a mother and now with as a grandmother with an almost 4-year-old and an almost 1-year-old granddaughter. I know our oldest granddaughter thrives on routine and familiar settings. And when sometimes things are a little wonky in schedule, she has a bit harder of a time adjusting. It's important to consider children with impairments and how those types of things also impact them. Because sometimes, particularly with some impairments, a change in a child's setting or routine can result in profound difficulties that truly impact them in a way that it does not impact other children. Other types of things to consider are, again, referencing those early intervention and preschool programs, as well as special education services that the child may be receiving. These can provide incredibly valuable information on how that child is functioning with the limitations or with the symptoms and conditions that they have. We're going to look at the extent of the special education services. For example, is the child largely in a regular classroom? Does the child have a one-on-one aide? Is the child being given special accommodations with testing, such as extra time, or is someone reading the testing to the child? Does the child have a fidget chair or a wiggle chair? Some children have significant difficulty sitting still for that long at school. Those things can all be very insightful in determining the extent of the limitations. Speaking of school and special education services, Social Security is also going to look at how the child is doing academically in school. Are they meeting and exceeding the educational goals? How are they doing on standardized testing? Also with school, Social Security is going to look at the behavior or the discipline history to see if the child is behaving or if these impairments are creating issues in terms of behavior at school that would warrant discipline. And again, this is where information that both the parents, caregivers, and teachers all can combine to provide that makes it easier to evaluate how severe the limitations are. Another thing to consider is the effect of treatment, including the child's medications and other treatments. Unfortunately, medications can have side effects, both for adults and for children. And even if a medication is able to help alleviate or control symptoms, if the side effects are so significant, it could create a potential disability case. If the medication helps the child in terms of hyperactivity or focus, but at the same time can be so sedating that the child is having difficulty being awake, paying attention, concentrating at school because of fatigue, that is something certainly to consider. And as with adults, Social Security is going to look at the type of treatment that the child is getting. Is it generally conservative or is it more invasive? All of these are pieces of a puzzle that need to be put together and evaluated for a child's case.
Curiously, Shannon, quick question. How of all the cases, and you've worked on many over your career, of all the cases, how often do you see a child disability, Social Security disability case, if you had to put even a number on it?
Would have to say on this side of the process, in terms of in practicing Social Security law, representing claimants, I would have to say probably less than 5% of our workload has been child cases. When I worked for Social Security, I have to say it's hard to put a number on it, but certainly I feel comfortable saying the minority of cases have been child.
And how is the financial piece configured for a child? I understand with adults, and they look at what they've earned. And how does that? I'm completely ignorant to that side of the process.
Excellent question. With child disability benefits, there are a couple of different types. What we're talking about today would be child SSI. And SSI benefits are based on household income and resource limitations. So I apologize, I got tongue twisted. Social Security is going to look at the income and the resources of the child's household in determining the benefit amount. In the future, we will do another webinar and talk about, they're called Disabled Adult Child Benefits, or DAC is the acronym, which the money side of those benefits are very different, as are the eligibility requirements and the age that is considered. So for child SSI, we're looking at while the child is a minor, before their 18th birthday.
Gotcha. And then it's a completely different, you have to switch gears, obviously, once they become a legal adult.
Correct. And that leads into another point. If a child is approved for disability benefits when they turn 18, because the adult standard of disability is different, Social Security will then do what's called an age 18 redetermination and evaluate the child's disability based on those adult standards as compared to the child standards.
Okay. All right. If anyone would like to have a private consultation, confidential, free consultation, to determine whether your family is eligible in any way, shape, or form for child disability benefits, or certainly for adult disability benefits, please reach out to Stanley Law at 1-800-608-3333. That's our phone number, and they will eventually get you to Shannon if there are certain criteria that, through a quick question and answer process, can be determined that you have a potential viable Social Security disability case for either yourself or your child. You can also email at info@stanleylawoffices.com. You can visit us at stanleylawoffices.com. And as a reminder, this is available, this service is available to anyone through Stanley Law Offices in all 50 states. Shannon, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close today?
When in doubt, always ask questions. If you're not sure if your child or yourself has a viable claim, reach out. It doesn't cost anything to ask, and we'll gladly take the time to listen and to see if it's something that we can help you with.
Wonderful. Thank you. Be well, get better. Shannon, thank you for your time today. Thank you all out there for either watching this live or on replay, and we'll see you next time as we go through the next aspect of Social Security disability benefits, as Shannon inferred. All right, take care, everyone. God bless.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.